Hello, everyone. It's Shane Conto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland Vintage Roadshow here on the SPDM Crew Podcasting Network. And this is my monthly show where, to be perfectly honest, I just give myself an excuse to talk about all of my favorite films. And this isn't about any deep critique of the films, it's just why I love them so much. And every month I have a guest, and joining me for this month's episode on Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven is my wife, Jess. Jess, thank you so much for coming on.
I'd be here, Shane.
Jess is one of my very few, basically two, resident Western fan friends.
Aficionados.
Yes, so Jess is my first repeat guest on this podcast, and previously was on the first ever episode of the Wasteland Vintage Roadshow as we talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So
There's
we're
a
here.
theme.
We're back for some more westerns. And this film is from 1992. Retired Old West gunslinger Will Money reluctantly takes on one last job to avenge an injustice with the help of his old partner and a newer outlaw known simply as the Schofield Kid. There's a lot more layers to this film and a lot more threads, but this film is written by David Webb Peoples, directed by Clint Eastwood, starring Clint Eastwood, Gene Hackman, Morgan Freeman, Richard Harris, and plenty more character actors along the way. And in particular, there's some bigger, broader topics that we always start off with on this show. And Jess, what are your general thoughts on Clint Eastwood as a director?
I think he's in his prime at this point, honestly, between this and Million Dollar Baby too. But I think that, he was born and bred in this genre. He started in
Mm,
Rawhide and he did other stuff like Play Misty for me,
yeah,
which I would argue is not a Western. That might be a hot take. But I would say that's not a Western.
certainly not a Western.
But I think he's really in his element in this one, both in directing himself and, you know,
Everybody else as well. And it's interesting because Clint Eastwood for a long time was one of my favorite directors. He was in my top 10. It's just challenging recently because he hasn't really come out with anything particularly great.
mm,
I would argue, like, probably the closest thing would probably be American Sniper back in 2014, which is 10 years ago.
mm,
And even before that, Gran Torino,
mhm.
which was like 2008. So he's had a lot of films from other genres that he's directed.
He's also really old.
And he also hasn't directed, like, you have a stretch like in 2011 doing J. Edgar, which turned out to be a pretty
I
boring
was gonna say
movie,
snooze fest.
and Jersey Boys in 2014, which, like,
I heard it was way too long. I haven't seen it.
well, like, who thought Clint Eastwood should be the person to adapt Jersey Boys? Like, that
Noted
just,
musical enthusiast Clint Eastwood.
but like, he had Letters of Iwo Jima in '06. I really do think so. Like, '03 with Mystic River,
Oh,
2004
I
with
forgot
Million
he did
Dollar
Instagram.
Baby. Those were I feel like that was his last like peak. Because here with '92's Unforgiven and the film, even the films that he did leading up to this point, it had been a while since he had done his last Western that he had directed was Pale Rider,
Mm.
about 7 years before this.
Also starring Clint Eastwood.
Also starring Clint Eastwood. This was still a point in his career where he was starring in all of his movies on top of directing them. And it's such an interesting collection of different films, like something like The Bridges of Madison
I saw that.
County.
Have you seen that?
I have, and I've read the
Okay.
book.
Even
And
though I know it's not his best, I still enjoy it a lot because I was like, oh, well, Meryl Streep with that accent, maybe not great, but
like, you have so many great films that he's done, and I'm partial to like Outlaw Josie Wales or High Plains Drifter.
the westerns.
Yes, he uncredited was one of the directors on Dirty
I
Harry.
did not know he directed Play Misty for me.
Yeah, that was his first film he directed.
What an interesting one.
It is an interesting choice to be the first one. He basically shadowed, um, was it Don Siegel? Yeah, on both The Beguiled and Dirty Harry,
Mm.
and really started getting his feet wet in terms of directing. Because we know he's notorious for the we do one take and that's it. You better be ready. And Morgan Freeman was very interesting in an interview talking about that approach and saying why he loves it so much is that Clint trusts you as an actor to do your job.
Does inspire confidence.
And he expects you to do the work before you get to the scene. Like you better be ready.
He's like everybody's grandpa. If you're gonna go help him out in the garage, you better be ready.
And like obviously Morgan Freeman did at least 3 films between Unforgiven and $1 Million Baby and Invictus with Clint Eastwood, where he played Nelson Mandela. But Clint Eastwood has a great track record of some really amazing films he's directed, and also some turds. And I feel like you need to have the right cast of actors to work in his films because you do have to do the work. You have to show up and be ready to go.
Space Cowboys was a wild person.
It felt like he got to hang out with
Yeah, really
some
did.
buddies and stuff like
Felt
that.
like the boys getting together to go into space.
When I think the other challenging thing too, like why a lot of people do love working with him, he's extremely relaxed apparently on the set. He doesn't even say like action or anything. He'll just like
Do your
go ahead and just go.
Again, it's like grandpa's playtime. You come over and just do whatever.
Yeah, but the thing is, he has also been directing for over 50 years.
94.
So like he was not grandpa when he was directing
Well, and he probably
originally.
has like 30 grandkids because he's got like 1,000,000 kids.
There you go.
Love that for him.
Now, talking about Unforgiven, as I feel like is the true turning point for a whole entire genre of film. Because this was like the nail in the coffin of the Western being a consistent genre that made up a big
Good
chunk.
guy versus bandits and whatever.
It's like this completely tore the mythos of the Western down. And this was Clint Eastwood said, "This is my last Western that I'm doing." Like you could argue Cry Macho's a modern Western and stuff like that, but I know neo-Western, but like this was it.
Mule also in the West, sort of.
It's much more of like it feels more like a crime thriller than it does like a neo-Western.
Minus the 20-something.
And having sex with a couple of 20-year-old Mexican women. And him singing Dean Martin as he drives down the highway.
Hope to reach the age of just not
giving a shit,
not caring anymore.
That might be one of my biggest disappointments in terms of a film, because that trailer sold me that this was going to be his next great thriller and he was really back in action, and then you watch it and just like fun time.
Like, drug running business.
Basically what it is. There's very little tension.
We love that. I love that for him.
But like it was a fun watch, but like it's not something that like, wow, this is what the trailer promised me. But think about this context of modern Western, so films made in modern times with Western settings and stuff like that. What are some of your favorite modern Westerns, those have come out in the 90s and the 2000s?
This one.
Yes. This obviously is one of the greatest Westerns of all time, but arguably the best Western to come out in the past 30 years, especially in our lifetime.
It's not obviously True Grit's my favorite film, but this is my favorite Western.
Also, there you go. There's another modern Western that you love.
Of course, I was getting there.
Okay, go ahead, Jess.
Hell or High Water.
Yep, which happens to also be a neo-Western.
Wind River.
Also happens to be a neo-Western written by Taylor Sheridan.
Wow, Taylor Sheridan.
Wow, Taylor Sheridan.
Slow West. I enjoy Slow West a lot. Even though it is pretty slow at some points, but
it's also like
it's a good time.
81 minutes.
It's maybe could be slower West.
It's a lean movie.
Shane, help me out, Logan.
Logan, definitely a great neo-Western, also science fiction neo-Western.
It's fine.
I would put up 310 to Yuma.
Oh yeah.
James Mangold's other Western.
That's a good one.
Great remake, fantastic cast between Russell Crowe, Christian Bale, Ben Foster. Which throw Ben Foster in a Western or neo-Western and you're doing pretty damn well for yourself. He was so good in Hell or High Water as well.
That also has Jeff Bridges.
Yes. I would love to see. I feel like Open Range is one that I want to check out. I don't think I've watched that. I've seen pieces of that on
Not
TV.
the animated one, just to make sure. Oh, that's
That's
Home
Home
on
on
the
the Range,
Range. Okay.
which I guess technically is a western.
Rango's up there for me.
Yes,
Love
Rango's fantastic. Also a neo western, seeing as it's set now.
No
Like
Country for Old Men.
also a great neo western, which
Mhm.
I would argue is
Perhaps
the
there will be.
greatest neo western. And that's the thing too, because There Will Be Blood is a western. It's just I feel like it totes the line between being a neo western and like an actual traditional western
Yeah.
because of the time period.
I was gonna say it's a time that's set.
I would argue that Mask of Zorro
Oh yeah, with Antonio Banderas.
with Antonio Banderas. I love that movie. Martin Campbell really knows how to make some pulpy action adventure movies between that and GoldenEye and Casino Royale and stuff like that.
Is a Tombstone?
So, well, yeah,
Like
so it was the early 90s. Yeah, so it was that was Tombstone and Wyatt Earp, I feel like. And I feel like Dances with Wolves came out in 1990. I feel like 90 on really has that feeling of like this is a modern era for westerns. And because Dances with Wolves was this was like 2 out of 3 best picture winners between 90, 91, 92 were westerns.
Mm.
Because Dances with Wolves won. Should it have?
Mm.
Goodfellas probably has a strong argument for that.
I got one more.
91 was Silence of the Lambs, and then Unforgiven won in 92.
Oh yeah, Silence of the Lambs, a famous western. Prey. I would argue Prey is a western.
Prey is a western.
Prey.
Just, I guess that would be categorized under weird westerns too, because
Western just love
aliens.
You know, shout
that's
out to Wild West. I don't care. I love that movie. It's a mess.
It is a modern western.
I love it.
You love Loveless.
Wild West.
Kenneth Branagh's Loveless.
Love the giant spider.
Well, you know the backstory of that, right?
Yeah, I do.
For those listening, that was supposed to be the climax of the death of Superman movie Tim Burton was making, and Warner Brothers is like, well, we love this giant spider idea. Let's just throw it in at the end of a western.
I love them for that. It's so good. It's 10 crazy. Out of 10. John Carter, I guess I've never seen it, but I think that's a space western, right?
I would, yeah, it's in that same vein of like Star Wars being that kind of idea. John Carter was boring.
Yeah, I mean, and now at this point, I think I'm just naming them.
Well, and
Tremors.
Weird modern neo western right there.
I may just be looking at your movie collection. Yeah, pick out titles.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah,
but there are a lot of really good modern westerns, and we might not get them as regularly, but I do love the fact that like we still get westerns and people are still willing to make them. Like our history. Like The Thicket that came out this year, I thought was a good one with Peter Dinklage in it and Juliette Lewis.
People love Bone Tomahawk. I didn't see it.
I do really like Bone Tomahawk a lot. As Craig Zahler, going back to some like bygone era of filmmaking. But getting into Unforgiven, thinking about like the direction of this. So like we talked a lot about Clint Eastwood as a director. I think this might be the best directed movie that he has, because it has this very sobering atmosphere about it. There's a somberness to it, and it's very sobering in the fact that like there's nothing fantastic about this in terms, not like great. I mean, there's nothing like big movie like about it. It is gritty. It is intense. It is awkward. Mm-hmm. Like the West actually was, because you
don't kill them right away every time. People don't screw up.
You don't just fan weapons and they work. So like all those kinds of things. But I just feel like Clint Eastwood had such a great handle on crafting this film. It's gorgeous. Even just the bookends of the film where you see him walking out to his wife's grave, the beginning and the end, it's just like that shot in particular is just gorgeous.
Oh yeah.
And the landscapes, it's able to capture the beauty of the world, or like the landscape, but also the lack of beauty of the world, like
Yeah.
the human
Brutal.
world. It is a brutal film.
Yeah, it's brutal. I mean, it's dirty, it's filthy. Like when he shoots that poor young guy. I mean, I do feel bad for that guy, even though he, was implicated in everything. He tried to make amends. Just he was unforgiven.
Well, and I think that's one of the key pieces to this film is that like this film doesn't have the tone where like rah the good guys I get it or this is a revenge film. Like everybody is guilty of something.
No one dies easy either. Like people
Mm-mm.
are writhing on the ground, they're bloody. He's like screaming. It's yeah. And people can't go through with it either. I mean, it's not like I'm gonna be cool, pow pow pow. It's like I can't do it. I can't finish him off.
There's multiple characters that choose to not kill people because they can't go through it
Mhm.
and understanding what the feeling really is of killing somebody.
Mhm.
And you know, I know one of your favorite lines in this. It's like it's an interesting thing killing a man.
Hell of a thing, killing
Killing a
a man.
man.
You take everything he's got and everything he's gonna have, or something like that.
Yeah, and just that feeling of realizing like that's what you're doing to somebody. You're erasing them.
Yep. And deserves got nothing to do with it. Love that chef's kiss.
This is a really well written film with some incredible dialogue and
It's true. He's doing it for money. He doesn't really care. I mean, it's not great that he, cut up the sex worker, but like he's doing it because he needs money. That's it. It's not a glorious thing. It's not for clout.
no, he's desperate because he's failed
Yep.
as a farmer,
He
as a pig
tried
farmer.
really hard.
And like he just leaves his two kids alone to run this farm.
Love that he's like, Sally will check in at some point. Sally's
Yeah.
probably like, I didn't sign up for this.
And just this whole entire experience and what I feel like is so impactful about this film is this is like the revisionist western.
Mhm.
Like this completely changes your perspective on like the west, what the west is. And that's why I feel like English Bob, that character, is so important to this film because he is the catalyst of like he is the gunslinger
Mhm.
that has become so famous.
He's got a writer who's writing Penny Dreadfuls with him.
Yep, and stuff like that.
The Duck of Death.
The Duck of Death, which Gene Hackman's character, Little Bill, is that sobering presence that just like douses a flame.
He's
Like
such a bastard.
he is such a bastard, and
And he's terrible at a lot. Like I love when he's building the like all the people are just talking crap about him and he's
how
like
bad he is at building life.
much of a carpenter. And they just
Yep.
keep saying that.
Just like I don't think there's a single straight right angle in that whole entire house.
I love to that he's like, no, I built the whole thing. Well, someone helped with, this part, and you pan over and it's way better looking. The main structure is great.
It's such an interesting experience because, like, yes, you have English Bob portrayed as this character that he killed all these people, and then Little Bill's the dousing of the flame of like, no, this
He's
is
like,
what
I was
really
there.
happened. Yeah, they didn't call him two guns because he carried two guns because he
Oh
had the
yeah,
world's biggest dick.
I love it. Just forget about that line, and then when I watch it, I'm always like, and he's
And
like, if he didn't have that big dick, he'd still be here, whatever.
maybe if he didn't have that big dick and had a second gun,
Yeah, that's it.
because he tried to quickly shot himself in the foot, and then his gun blew up in his hand because like that happens to that model of
Oh
gun.
yeah,
And
especially
Bob,
if you didn't clean it.
exactly. So like that whole entire thing
I
just
got lucky.
you don't see people cleaning guns in westerns. You don't see guns jamming. Fire.
You should clean
Um
your guns. We
and
should see more scenes of that.
and which Jess's favorite thing in a fight in movies is when people throw their weapons
I
at
do
people,
love
and when Will just hucks his
shotgun.
shotgun right at
Yeah, I wasn't missing
Little Bill.
because nobody expects it. Look, you can be scrappy and be alive or be honorable and get shot to death.
Well, and that's the thing
Although
because
nobody's honorable in this.
well, it's what's so interesting is like Bill and you have Bob's legacy was exaggerated. Bill is trying to erase his. He's like, I'm a lawman now. I'm a good person.
Lies.
I deserve to be able to be a good person.
I
There's a little
sold this.
there's a little moment where like Morgan Freeman's character even corrects Will that he underplayed his own
Mm,
experience because Will Money does not want to build up
no.
his he's trying to put that behind
He's been
him.
washed in the blood.
He is a horrible human being. And he has done some of the worst things you can
Oh, yeah.
think. So, like, I've killed about anything that crawls on this earth.
Yeah, I mean, he it owns up to it too. He said, well, not owns up to it. He says, "I've killed women, children, whatever."
And his and what's true is he's true. There is no exaggerating about what Will Money can do. And that's why the finale of this film is so damn impactful.
Mm.
Because he comes in like a specter. He is like channeling that Clint Eastwood of High Plains
The
Drifter.
vengeance.
Like he is this entity. He feels like an entity where they're like, we're gonna find it, and then he just turns around and
Yeah.
he's just standing there.
He taps into his own legacy that he's been trying to avoid
Well, and
because
because
he's unforgiven.
he can do it. He can do all those
Oh yeah,
things. He takes his time.
it's a slow burn too. Yeah, into finding that
You see that he specifically takes his time aiming.
he's methodical.
He is
That's what makes him scary.
well, and that's the thing because that's the only way that you can be successful
Well, and
in real life, like real life version of
it's
the
luck,
West.
and
Yeah.
well, that's what Mr. Beauchamp gets into because he's like, I have in my notes that you take out the best gun first, and he's like, yeah, no, that was just coincidence, bro.
Well, like he specifically was there to kill Bill,
Yeah,
and he knew that most of those men would run
oh
away
yeah,
like a
he
bunch of
gave him
chicken
I mean,
shits.
he gave him a chance.
Well, yeah, and like he knew that most of them wouldn't do anything because everybody's a big man until you have to pull a gun and actually kill somebody.
Yeah, he cowed them right over.
And that whole entire sequence that I like to refer to as money rides
Yeah.
is because
Money
he
talks, no money
death
rides.
death comes in on a pale horse.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he is on the Flea Britain Gray, isn't he?
And he comes into that town in darkness. The only lighting is fire that they have around Ned's body. And he comes in dark clothes, skeletal looking. Because like at this point, like Clint Eastwood's a really skinny
Well, and he
man.
had like pneumonia too. He was
Yeah.
fighting pneumonia when it came out.
And everything is so like Clint Eastwood might get a reputation for being like, well, let's get this done in like one for you to be able to do that, you have to do a shit ton of planning. And everything is so intentional.
Well, and he's 6'4". I mean, he looks every bit of 6'4".
Well, and he is such a presence. And you know, you see the switch turn on
Mm-hmm.
when that young woman tells him what happens to Ned, and he takes the liquor from the Schofield kid and starts
Mm-hmm.
sipping it. Clint Eastwood's performance in this is incredible because his whole entire demeanor changes.
Yeah, he takes a big old swig and
He becomes tenser
he's
and
Will Money,
tense.
not William Money.
Yep. You see that coming over him and him realizing it's like I think in that moment he realizes he has to be it again.
Mm.
And he knows that he has to do it again. It's such a fascinating performance, and I really wish I wish Clint cleaned up at this Oscars and won Best Actor, but like, wah,
They,
Scent of a Woman.
there was so much better
Well, and like
performances of Al Pacino.
Denzel Washington's Malcolm X was also
Mhm.
nominated that year, and like you picked Al Pacino for Scent of a Woman,
Lifetime Achievement Award. They should
which
just have that.
they do.
Oh,
They do give
then
lifetime
why?
achievement Oscars to people,
Then why?
which apparently, like Paul Newman had just received one right before he won for Color of Money.
Oh,
So like he wound up and because like I think a lot of actors feel disrespected because they feel like it's like sorry participation trophy.
okay. Well,
Like
they should put on better. No,
well,
some.
well, it's all politics and
Yeah.
obviously like Scent of a Woman's up there along with the original True Grit with John Wayne. There's no way
Okay.
that John Wayne should have won Best Actor for that.
Not a fan.
If he was going to win it for anything, it should have been The Searchers.
Yep.
Like, it, those kinds of things happen a lot. I love Gary Oldman. Should Gary Oldman have won Best Actor for The Darkest Hour? It was a big showy performance and it was really good. But to be frank,
But was it great?
it should have been Daniel Day Lewis again for Phantom Thread, or even Daniel Kaluuya for Get Out. But
Mhm.
like Clint won Best Director, which he certainly earned. He won this one Best Picture, which it certainly earned. I feel like this, even if people like fun westerns, this is not that kind of
No.
movie, and I feel like people might be let down or disappointed by that fact. It takes its time because it's trying to really tell a meta level story of really taking down everything that you expect out of westerns and recontextualizing it in a grounded, somber atmosphere. Because yeah, some people are bad shot; they can't see. Some people don't have like. Some people are gonna lay there bleeding out for
Yep.
hours. Um, and sometimes you're gonna pull a weapon and you're gonna drop it,
Hmm.
or it's gonna misfire, or you're gonna miss by a lot because you're rushing. 'Cause that happens a lot in the climax. All these guys like fanning weapons and they're hitting like the wall, and
Yeah.
he just slowly pans
Mhm.
and just shoots. He is so methodical. But Clint Eastwood is so fantastic in this. Morgan Freeman, I think, gives a really good performance too as Ned, and he has to show like he has his moments where he's being a little like
Immature.
condescending to the Schofield kid when he's talking him down. There are moments where he's immature, like letting the advances.
Oh, the free ones.
Mhm.
Oh, and the free ones. He gets both.
Yeah, and then there's moments of fear. Like that moment where he couldn't shoot the guy. And you can just see it all over
It's
Freeman's
conflict.
face. I feel like a lot of people complain that Gene Hackman won Best Supporting Actor for this movie, and I don't get it because he has to be a really grounded performance. He's the one trying to tear down others for being over the top and showy.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. And like you feel the vitriol in him.
Oh yeah. He's
It's just like
weird.
you when he has one barrel left. When he when he kills me, hope it and like you could just feel the anger and then you feel the fear
Mhm.
when he or is it fear? It's more like it's disbelief.
Mhm.
You feel the
It's the
disbelief
I didn't deserve this.
when he's laying there dying,
Well, he probably thought because he made things right and was a lawman, he was above being killed by.
which is what's so frustrating is like, yeah, he was a quote unquote lawman. He was just
He wasn't a very good one.
he was living off his power.
Oh yeah.
And he got so much pride out of putting people in their place and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Richard Harris is fantastic. One of the greats of all time in terms of acting, and he just played English Bob. So there's so much condescension in just the way that he is so thinks he's so much better than
Talking
everybody.
about the you can't shoot royalty because if you tried, then your gun would jam, or well, you'd be so taken by them that you couldn't. I'm like, oh man, this guy's never heard of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Just
So
kidding, this is beforehand.
so full of shit.
Sure thing.
James Wolvitt as a Schofield kid, he's like the one where I'm like, did I really think that he gave a great performance? What would have been interesting is if they got like a Christian Slater
Mm,
to like. Can you imagine if Christian Slater was a Schofield kid?
I think he would have too much charisma and swagger. Like, I think part of the Schofield kid is that he's nervous because he's lying out of his ass the whole time.
Because like I'm trying to think if I know anything else that he's been in because like that's the thing about some Clint Eastwood movies. Like you'll see like beat character actors that you like haven't seen in anything
Yeah.
else. Frances Fisher, who played Strawberry Alice, has been in a lot of different kinds of things.
By the way,
She was in Titanic.
who was she in
Um,
Titanic?
uh, her mom.
Oh,
Yeah, and
hate that
she
lady.
was such a strong character in this film,
Oh.
as Strawberry Alice, who's like the leader of all the sex workers, and she's the one that comes up with the idea to like hire
Put a
guns
bounty.
and stuff like that. And just there's a lot of really good like Anthony James who plays
Skinny.
Skinny is just
Hate that guy.
he is perfectly terrible in what he's doing.
Love that there's both a skinny and a slim in this movie.
Hmm. It's just it has such a great cast around them. I feel like the music, there's not a lot of it,
No.
but when it comes in, it has such a beautiful and somber theme to it.
Very minimalist.
Like you hear it over like the opening and the end, and it works really well. And just like the music's haunting in that final sequence where like he's riding off into the darkness. It feels kind of like a horror movie because
He's
he is a
scary.
real monster.
He's a monster, man.
And I remember thinking about this idea of like Clint Eastwood directing. This is gonna sound weird, but directing like an Incredible Hulk film where you spend the whole entire film wanting the Hulk, but all he wants to do is be Bruce Banner.
Aww.
And then you find it like he gets pushed to the point where he has to be the Hulk, and how terrifying that.
Well, that's basically this movie.
That's it. Well, that's exactly what this movie is, which is why it's I think it would be a really interesting thing. I also would have loved for him to do an Old Man Logan movie
Aww.
at some point. Obviously, being Logan.
Yeah, I was gonna say him as Logan.
That would have been cool. That would have been so cool. But I guess, Jess, is there anything else that really stands out to you about Unforgiven that you want to talk about?
The whole movie.
The whole movie does stand out. There's like maybe one scene where like, did we really need that? And I think I forget it a lot of the time. It's the scene where it has all of like the deputies and stuff talking.
Oh yeah, they're
Like,
talking crap about the angles.
yeah, and like
Not a carpenter.
I do feel like that adds well, and even if it's one of the most least interesting scenes in the film, it still adds layers to what it means for Bill in terms of a character, which is interesting. But I have an interesting question that I want to throw out here. Thinking about Clint Eastwood's directing uh, filmography, a lot of his recent stuff hasn't been the best. But what would you wish, like, if you could pick a movie where he would have ended his directing career, what do you wish that it was?
Probably Gran Torino.
I think that's because, like,
It's a safe pick.
it is. He had Invictus and Sully, and Sully, I think, is a really fine film. Invictus, I feel like, is probably his most praised, and like American Sniper. But like to be honest, I feel like that would have been a really fitting film for him to wrap up with was Gran Torino. Like, I'm not gonna say that I regret that we have Prime Macho, which I think was a fine film. Richard Jewell, which I think was a fine film. The Mule is a really entertaining movie. The less we say about the 1517 to Paris, the better.
Oh,
Sully, a really fine film. American Sniper, even though it's not really a true depiction of
what
our
actually
style,
in it?
I think what it's trying to do, it does incredibly well. Jersey Boys and J. Edgar were just really, those were misfires.
Boring.
And I haven't seen Hereafter that came out in 2010 with Matt Damon and Bryce Dallas Howard in it. But I think a safe bet would have just been like ended after Grant because like he had Letters of Iwo Jima, Gran Torino, and like going off in the sunset because like Gran
It was a
Torino
great run.
feels like a going off into the sunset kind of movie.
I mean, he does kind of does in the movie.
Well, that's exactly why.
Mhm.
But Jess, thank you so much for coming on and talking about one of my favorite movies with me.
You're welcome.
And thank all of you out there for listening. Make sure to like, comment, and share on this episode. What's your favorite Clint Eastwood performance? What's your favorite film that he's directed? Maybe they're the same thing. Also, make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. The SPDM Crew Podcasting Network has a lot of great content, whether it's movies and television, physical media, comic books, music, movies, um, more movies, because there's just a lot of movies, music, sports, and just chatting life with Luke over on Flicks and Chill. We have a lot of great content. Jess will be on there soon.
Yeah.
When that episode releases.
Yeah.
Also, if you liked our logo, give a big shout out to my buddy Joe, who created the logo here for the Wasteland Vintage Roadshow. Absolutely love the drive through and like the drive-in movie design for it. And if you really like his art, check him out. And most importantly, thank you as always for tuning in and supporting the Wasteland Vintage Roadshow here on the SPDM Crew Podcasting Network.